Hey there and welcome back. After we've successfully set up our database and S3 file storage in the last video, today we are going to create dynamic pages and deploy our Payload project to Verel. Now, let me just briefly talk about the backend structure of our project. First of all, we have a users collection, but this is not related to the website right now. It just manages who has access to our Payload admin panel. What we do have though, and this media collection exists already, is a collection, the media collection, that has uploads enabled. Those uploads are stored on S3, which we hooked up with our S3 plugin. And this is where we will put all our images and videos that we want to show on the website. Also, to create pages, we have a pages collection. So every page will have a name, a slug, and a layout that consists of blocks. Now, this is a bit similar to, for example, WordPress, where every page, let's take as an example the Gutenberg editor, has Gutenberg blocks as their layout. So for example, you have one hero section, that is one block. You have just a standard rich text section, that might be a block. You might have another block that shows all the recent 3 blog articles. So you can think of those blocks as website sections that we can stack on top of each other to create a page. And in addition to that, we also have one header and one footer. Now, you could, in theory, create collections for those and have multiple headers and multiple footers, depending on, maybe you have 2 sub pages on your site that should look different. But in our case, we are making it simple. We just have one global header that is shown on the entire website and one global footer. The difference between a global and a collection in Payload is that in a collection, you can create multiple documents, and in a global, it looks pretty similar, but you can basically just create one document. Now for today's to-dos, first of all, we are going to set up TailwindCSS to use both in Payload and our frontend. After that, we're creating our pages collection, and we're also going to create 3 block schemas. Afterwards, we are setting up our header and footer, and last but not least, we're going to render our pages in the front end and show our blocks on those pages. The last point is obviously the deploy on Verel. That's what I forgot. So let's get started. We ended our last video by successfully implementing the S3 storage plugin, activating it for our already existing media collection, and testing the upload by uploading an image to our media collection, which has been uploaded successfully and we can access it. So let's get started by adding TailwindCSS support to our project. In order to do this, the first thing I have to do is create something called a root layout. That's just something that we need if we want to use the app router. And this is the file where we'll also import our Tailwind CSS styles so that they are applied to both our website frontend and also our Payload backend. So I will leave you this link in the description. You can basically just copy this boilerplate code, go into your app directory. By the way, we can get rid of this my route. This is just a demo route. And in the app directory, I'm going to create a file called layout.tsx. And I'm going to paste in this boilerplate code. Now this will not change anything, although it shows a 500 error. No, that is not related to it. So if we refresh, it should pretty much show the exact same thing as before. To install Tailwind, we just have to head over to the official Tailwind CSS Next.js installation guide. And that's one of the cool things with Payload version 3. Now that it's a native Next.js, we can just use all of the setup tutorials that we would use if we would just have a standard Next.js app. So I can skip the first part because I don't need to create a new project. I can now just install all the necessary dependencies. I'm going to copy it manually because I will use pnpm instead of npm to install them. And as soon as they're installed, I'm going to call pnpx init. And that will create two configuration files, the Tailwind config file and the post CSS config file. Now we have to add our content sources in the Tailwind config file. That just shows Tailwind where our source files lie so that it can compile the necessary classes. So I'm going into Tailwind config, and under content I'm adding our source folder because that's where everything lives. Now we need to create a globals.css file. I'm going to create this in another subdirectory. You could just put it in here, but I'm going to create a styles folder to have it a bit more organized. And in that I'm going to say globals.css. And I'm going to paste our Tailwind layers in here. And to apply our styles, that's where our root layout comes in. I'm going to import this here. So I'm going to say import at styles globals.css. Now to test this, I'm just going to create a static page real quick by creating a page.tsx file. Sorry, that is not the correct folder. I need to put it in the app folder, not the payload folder. I'm just going to use a React functional component that says hello, that's German, hello world. And I'm going to style it using Tailwind class name. So I'm going to say padding 4, background green with 2 E's, green 100, text XL, and text green 500. So let's restart our development server and see if Tailwind CSS already works. I'm opening a new tab and just going to localhost 3000 without admin. And that shows us our hello world with our padding and our colors applied. So Tailwind CSS works. Next up, we're going to add our pages collection so that we can actually create pages in Payload. I'm going back into our collections. So I'm going in here, creating a new file pages.ts, and I'm adding an export const pages, which is the type collection config. And I'm going to say slug pages. You can give it labels, you can do a lot of things, but for now I'm going to keep it simple and just give it fields. And it will have 3 fields. So it will have a name, which is just internal so that we know what the page is about, but it will still be required. We will have a slug, which, like I said, basically determines where the page lives on the website. So /blog/ whatever. And I'm going to place this slug on the right sidebar in the admin panel. So I'm going to say admin position sidebar. This just makes it a little bit more organized. And last but not least, the most important part is the layout field. Now this will actually be type blocks, and I have to specify the blocks property here, which currently is an empty array because we haven't created any block schemas yet. So let's go back to our payload configuration, and under collections, I'm going to add our pages collection. Now, thanks to hot module reloading, this should already have updated our admin config in here. And as you can see, we have our pages collection. So let's just create a new page for now. I'm going to call it the home page. And this slug in and of itself is empty. We have to use a little bit of a workaround here. So I'm going to call the slug index. We will later replace the index slug with an empty slug basically, but this just helps it to be more organized. We can make the slug a required field, which we should probably do, by the way. So in pages, I'm just going to say slug required true, because you can't have a page without a slug. And as you can see, hot module reloaded, it's required now immediately. Now, we currently can't add any blocks to the layout, like I said, because we don't have any block schemas yet. I'm just going to save the page, and that's all we have to do to create our backend for our pages collection. Before we continue building our frontend, I just quickly wanted to remind you that we recently launched our own All About Payload page. Now, there isn't a lot on there. You will see the links to both our 10x snippets and our theme generator tool, which you can check out. Most importantly, we also started a newsletter. So if you're interested in, getting news about everything that is going on in the Payload ecosystem, everything related to Payload, but also Next.js, everything that is relevant for developers that use Payload, then feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. It's completely free. We will send you probably an email once every 2 weeks. And if you do have anything that you are especially interested in, please let us know in the comments below, and we will probably add that to the newsletter sooner or later. All right, let's get back. Before we set up our header and footer, I'm just going into our app router and I'm creating a route segment. So this is just a directory in brackets. I'm going to call it website. And this is just a way to keep things more organized. Usually, if you create a directory in the app router, it will use it as a route, which means if you create a page in that directory, it will be, slash website in this case, slash page. However, or not page, it will be just slash website. But if you put it in brackets, the routing will actually ignore it. So this is a way to just structure your files to make more sense. In this case, we will have one payload route section and we have one website route section, and they are just separated. Another benefit is that we can now apply a specific layout just to our website and not to both our website and payload, because we don't want to show the header both in the payload admin panel and on our front end. We just wanted to show on our website. So what I'm going to do is in our website folder, I'm going to create another layout file. I'm just going to paste this in real quick, but it's a very simple React component. All that it gets is children as a props. And as long as you return them somewhere, it will basically return all the nested routes and pages that you have. But this is where we're going to add our header and our footer. To add them, since we first need a global for the header and footer, we're going to create them. So I'm going to create a new directory called globals to keep them separated from collections. And in globals, I'm going to create header.ts and I'm going to create footer.ts. Now they will have a pretty simple schema. I'm going to export const header. This is a global config. It will have a slug header and it will have fields. For now, it will only have a logo field. So I'm going to name it logo. It will be type upload. And it will be in relation to the media collection. Also, I'm going to create a navigation menu that I'm just going to call nav. And I'm going to give it the label navigation. It will be type array. And as the fields for the array, they will be very simple. You can add a lot more info to your links. You can add the rel attribute. You could add the target attribute. We're going to keep it simple and just add a label. So what should be shown for the link and the actual link. Now our footer will actually have the exact same schema. So I'm just copying this. I'm changing the slug to footer and I'm going to export the const footer. However, I'm going to add a third thing, which is the copyright notice, which will just be a simple, no, it won't be a text area, it will just be a simple text field. So we should probably make those two required here. So I'm going to say required, and the navigation should have at least one item. So I'm going to say min rows 1. You could also specify max rows. So I could say max rows equals 5. And the copyright notice will be required as well. Same thing for the header, because a website without a logo is not nice. All right, so let's add our globals to the payload config. Below collections, I'm going to say globals. And in there, I'm just adding both of the schemas, header and footer. And if we go back to our admin panel, we should already see, if not, we should see it within a couple of seconds, our globals here. If I toggle them, I have our header and our footer, which I'm just going to pre-fill real quick. One cool thing about the newest update is that if you upload a media, you can now actually paste a URL instead of uploading a file, which can be handy because I can just copy our all about payload image, logo image address, and basically click on paste URL, click on add file, and that will add our logo here. Obviously, I will need to edit our name, logo, and I'm not sure what file type it was, probably WebP, yeah. So I'm going to say logo.webp. As an alt text, I'm going to say all about payload logo. I'm going to click on save. That will submit it. And for the navigation, I'm just going to do a link to our blog page, which we're going to add in a later video, which will live under /blog. And I can also add a link to Google, https google.com. I'm going to click on save. Same thing for the footer. Now I can just choose from existing. I'm going to choose the exact same logo. For the copyright notice, I'm going to say copyright 2024 at all about payload. And in the navigation bar, I'm going to say all about payload website. And I'm going to link to our new website. All right, we've now filled in header and footer. What is left is actually showing the information in the front end. To do this, I'm going back into our project. I'm creating a new folder for all of our blocks. And since those are global blocks, I'm going to put them in a subfolder called global. So let's create the blocks for this. I'm going to create another folder in there, call it header. And the reason why I'm creating an entire directory for a block is that due to the app router, we can now have a server component and also multiple client components for one block. So I'm going to create a new file in here, call it server.tsx. In there, I'm creating a React functional component. I'm just renaming it to header server. And for now, we can just display header. And we're going to do the same thing for our footer, footer server.tsx. Create a functional component. Doesn't want to autocomplete right now, so I'm just going to copy my footer code, paste it in here. Sorry, my header code, and rename it to footer server and show footer. To test if it works, we just need to add it to our website layout here. So instead of the comment, I'm going to add header server and header footer. Header footer server. And I'm also going to place the static page that we put in here within our website layout. So if I go back, check out our actual homepage and refresh, it's giving me some, I want to update the imports. So as soon as it has compiled, we are now getting header and now our page content, and below that our footer. While this is nice, we actually want to show the information that we added to payload for our header and footer. So there's this pretty cool thing that we can do now. If I go back to our header block, I can turn this into an async function. And what I can do here is now import payload basically. I'm going to say const payload equals await get payload HMR, which stands for hot module reload. That just makes sure that if you're using hot module reload during development, it's always up to date. I'm going to pass in a config object that I'm going to import from at payload config. That's it. Now we have our payload object and we can directly use the typesafe local API that payload provides us with to fetch our header global. So I'm going to say const header equals await payload dot find global. I'm going to specify the slug, and that's all we have to do. We now have all of the attributes in here. So what I could, for example, do is I can call the image component from next image. I can say source and specify the source as header.logo.url. What I'm also going to do, the next image component usually needs a width and a height. But since we don't want to use the original width and height of the logo, we sort of want to press it into one box. I'm going to wrap it in a relative div. And in the image itself, I'm going to specify the fill property so that it will actually try to fill the surrounding the parent div. I'm going to say fill, and class name I'm going to specify object contain. Now we can basically define our boundaries in here. I'm going to say width is 64 and height is 20. And we should now be able to display our image in our header. So let's check this out. There seems to be some error here. Yeah, so we just forgot to add the self-closing tag here. And it now seems to be showing our logo. Obviously it is not visible because we have to set the background to something darker, and voila, our logo is visible. If you've paid close attention, you've probably noticed that this is giving me a TypeScript warning or an error because it doesn't recognize the header as a valid prop here. So what Payload provides us with is a function called generate types. So I can say pnpm payload generate types, and that will create a type, a TypeScript type, for every collection that we've added to our payload config and global. To make this work, however, we need to go into our pages collection real quick and comment out our layout, because otherwise it will throw an error because the blocks array is empty. As soon as we've done that, we can run the generate type function. And if I go back to my server component, as you can see now, it has cleared the issue. So let me just add a bit more styling. I'm going to say padding Y is 12, max width is 5XL, and MX auto. And what I'm also going to add is I'm going to show our navigation items. So I'm going to say flex, justify center, items, center, and I'm going to add another div. And in that, I'm mapping through the navigation items from header. And for every one of them, I'm going to return a link. So this is a bit messed up, but I'm actually going to use a Next.js link. So I'm going to say link from next link. And I have to close this off. And it says that header.nav is possibly null or undefined. So let's check if, yeah, this is probably because this is not required. So let's set this to required and rerun our type generation. And if we go back here, this at least has cleared up. Now this is still giving me a warning that I'm going to ignore for now. I first have to add the alt attribute because otherwise the next image component will complain. So I'm going to say header.logo.alt. So if I go back to my development server, we now have something that looks a bit messed up because my styling isn't quite correct. I have to add another parent div here. and I'm just leaving the background in here. That will fix this. And on the flex div, I have to add with full. Sorry, not that one. I have to add the flex here, of course. Flex justify between W full. I'm going to remove this here. So let's check this out. Still doesn't seem to look quite right. And that's because by mistake, we actually added our navigation here into the image component. So this looks way better. Now it is next to each other. Sometimes it just helps to reload a page because the hot module reload currently is not 100% accurate, but it is in most cases. I'm just going to add item center as well to make it look a bit nicer. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for the footer. I can basically just copy and paste this in here again. That's not what I wanted. Can just do this. Footer server, fetch the footer. And in addition to that, in the middle, I'm going to just display the header dot copyright notice. Obviously it's not the header, but I still have to rename this variable, so I'm going to call it footer. Now we have the copyright notice here. In the footer we have the same issue that our navigation is currently not required. So in here I'm going to say required true. I'm not going to regenerate the types right now. So now we should be pretty much good to go. Obviously now our footer looks the exact same as our header, which I'm going to change a little bit. I'm going to say border top green 500. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. So now we should have something similar. Let's refresh. Yeah, the gray is too light. I have to make it 300. Or let's make it green 300. That's a bit more colorful. All right, so now we have our beautiful header and beautiful footer here. Let's continue by creating our block schemas. So back in our project, I'm going into blocks, and the first block I'm going to create is the cover block. And I'm going to give it a schema. So I'm going to call it schema.ts. I'm going to export const cover. And this is a block. I'm going to give it a slug called cover. And the cover block will basically just have, sorry, this is an array. It will have one title, which is a text, not a content, not an image. It will just have a title and a subtitle. Yeah. All right, next up, I'm going to create a rich text block. So I'm going to call it rich text, not rich text, rich text, schema.ts. By the way, you can name the file however you want. I just think it's very clear if you call it schema. So export const rich text, which is another block, slug rich text fields. This will only have one field as well, which is called content in its type rich text. Last but not least, we will have one image block that just displays an image. So I'm going to create the schema type block. This didn't import it, so it will have a slug image fields, and it will have one field called image, which will be type upload. So label image type upload and relation to the media collection. Also, I will make the image required because an image block without an image is kind of useless. To add those to our pages, all that we have to do is go back in here and comment out or comment back in our layout. And in here, I'm going to add the cover schema. I'm going to add the rich text schema, and I'm going to add the image schema. That was not the correct import. So this one is the correct one. So let's go back to our admin panel and edit our page, our home page, to actually show some content. So in our home page here, my internet connection is a bit slow today, so that's why it needs a bit more time to compile and fetch data. Now if I go and add layout, I can see my blocks here. The layout here, this should be in the center. This is messed up because of Tailwind. Tailwind does mess up a few small styling things. However, you can just exclude them one by one with custom CSS rules. We might do an advanced tutorial on that or share a code snippet, but this is not really disturbing in any way, so we'll just go for it. I'm going to add a cover block, my home page. This is an awesome payload page. Below that, I'm just going to add a rich text, and I can, for example, say an H2. This is an H2. This is just a normal text. Last but not least, I'm going to add an image block here where I'm basically just uploading, one of those Unsplash images. So beautiful scenery. Click on save. This will upload the image. Save the page. And for now, I will just duplicate the page. And instead of index, I'm going to call it second page. I'm going to call it second page, my second page. Just so that we can distinguish between those two. And I'm not going to add a rich text. I'm going to remove this block. It will just have the cover and the image block. So let's click on save. And now we've successfully created all of our backend data for the pages. Let's display them in the front end. To do that, I will have to create something called a dynamic route. In the website folder, I'm creating another folder. I'm putting in square brackets slug, and in there I'm creating a page.tsx file. Now I will paste in a code snippet here, and I will walk you through it step by step. This will not be relevant for now. So the first thing that we're doing, this is just a helper function that helps us query a page by a slug. So we give it a slug and it will basically return, it will use the Payload local API. It will return the page document that we queried it for. This is also a cached function, by the way. And one important part that we have to do here is we have to decode our slug that we get from our search params here, or params, because Next.js will actually encode them. And if you have any special characters in your slug, that might not be the case in English, but for example, in German, we have some special characters that are shown differently if they are encoded. And if you don't do this, this will not find the page here. So next up, we have the generate static params function. This is a replacement for the get static paths from the pages router, but it does the exact same thing. It just fetches all the pages that we created, basically with a limit of 1,000, but you can put it to 1,000,000 if you want. And it will return all the docs that we have in there, so all pages, and it will return the slug if it's not the index slug. So for the index slug, we are going to do something different, but I'm going to show you that in a second. So now we have the array, and it will generate them at build time. And this is just our default page function where we get the param, we query it. By the way, as you can see, this is a server-side function. We're using the Payload local API to query our page. If the page doesn't exist, we are returning a not found. This is just an export that we get from Next Navigation. It will just show the 404 page. And if we do have a page, it will show our page and our blocks in this page layout. Now this is an utility function that we still have to create. By the way, you are going to find all code snippets in our article that I will link in the description. So I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call it utils. And in utils, I'm going to create the render blocks function, or you can call it a component. I'm going to paste in another code snippet and explain it to you. It's pretty simple what we do here. Up here, this is currently empty. This is where we are going to map our block slugs to the actual block components. So for example, we have our cover block that has the slug block, the slug cover, and we will map the cover slug to the React component that it should display. So all that this component does, it goes through the page layout, and for every element in the page layout, for every block in the page layout, it basically checks, does it have a block? Is the block in the block components? And if yes, it will assign this variable to the actual React component, and it will just return this React component here. So if we have our cover block up there, it will return the cover block here, and it will give it all the props that it receives from the backend. So for example, our cover block will receive the heading prop and the title block and the subtitle block and the subtitle props. So this is pretty straightforward. I just have to go back to my page here, and this is called render blocks actually. So I can remove this import. That is the correct one. It seems to complain. Cannot find module add utils render blocks. This is here though. Sometimes the types are a bit slow here, especially when I'm recording. My PC seems to not handle it that well, but it should already work. Now if we just would visit our page, it would be empty because obviously the render blocks can't show anything right now. To change this, I'm going into our cover block and I'm creating a server.tsx file, which will be the React component that is shown for our cover block. So I'm just going to say RFC, and in there I will receive our title and subtitle block props, So title, subtitle, and now I can just display them basically. I can say the H1 should be a title, text 3XL, font bold, and the subtitle should just be text XL. I'm going to create a container here, say max with 5XL, and give it a padding Y of 20. Now to show this, I'm going back into render blocks, and here for the cover slug, I'm going to add the server here. I'm just going to rename it cover block server so I can import it more easily. Cover block server. So if we navigate to our second page, as we can see, our cover block is showing. I didn't center the text, by the way. Just going to do this real quick. So I'm going to say text center so that this looks a little bit better. But it's already rendering our blocks. Now, if we go back to our index page, we are still going to see just our static page that we created. But let's change that. Instead of our static code in our page file, I'm going to paste in a very simple code snippet. We're basically just importing the page template or the default export that we get here, the page, but without giving it any slug. So if we don't give it a slug, that means the slug will be indexed. So that will fetch the actual index page. So if we go back now, we don't see our static page, but we actually see our homepage code. Now this text still isn't centered, but now it is. So we've successfully rendered our first block. Let's continue with the image block. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go into our image and create server.tsx, creating a simple functional component, and this will only get the image prop. Instead of returning any text, I'm going to return the next image component, which will have a source of image.url, and the alt text will be image.alt. Like I said, we can give it a fixed width or height. I will just leave that as it is right now, but we still have to add types for our input here, and obviously also for title and subtitle here, which will be just strings. Let's add our image block in our block components. Image will be, and again I have to rename it to be able to import it easily, image block server. And if we go back to our website, we can now see our image. Let's again center this, flex, justify, center, and go back to our page. We can see our image and it should already be centered. Now the rich text component will be a bit more complex because we can't just show the rich text as a JSON object here, but we have to serialize the JSON data into visible JSX components. To do this, we're going to copy two files from the official Payload website template. And the first one is serialize and the other one node format. So this is basically our rich text serializer. I'm going to paste it into utils, serialize.tsx. I'm also going to copy the node format because it's a dependency. All right, so now this is what we can use to serialize our JSON into JSX. I'm going back to my rich text and I'm creating a new file, server.tsx, again, a React component. Now I'm renaming it straight away, rich text block server. This only gets one component, which is the content. And the content, unfortunately, is not a string. I'm going to type it as any because it's this rich text, huge rich text JSON object. So in here, I'm going to create another div. I'm going to give it a class name, rich text, because we will need that to style it later. And in here, I'm going to use the serialize lexical function. And I'm going to give it the nodes attribute, which will be content.root.children. So let's add our block, not in our payload config, but render blocks. So rich text and rich text block server. We are going to face some issues here because the serializer that we imported actually needs a few more components here. Now you can copy them as well from the website template and it will just work plug and play. But since we don't need them in this case, I'm just going to remove them, and this will make it a very simple rich text parser. Instead of importing the payload types from here, I'm just going to say add payload types, and I'm not sure why it can't find the node format again, but that is probably again to my PC. So I'm removing those types here, and I'm removing all those special blocks down here and commenting out the special link, or I'm removing it straight away. That way we got rid of our issues. If we go back, as you can see, here is our rich text, but it is not styled. So if we check our source code here, our elements, you can see this is actually an H2 and this is a P tag, but we can't style them directly in here because they're automatically generated by the serializer. We could, in theory, go into our serializer here, and instead of just adding this tag here, add the appropriate classes. But I think it's easier to have our rich text class, because what we can now do is we can say .rich text and use nested CSS to say h1. And now we can apply styles for this. So I'm just going to use autocomplete to apply some very basic styles. H4 should be this. Yeah, that should be fine for now. I'm also going to add a container. So I'm going to say max width 5XL MX auto. And let's go back to our rich text and check how it looks now. Refresh, and as you can see, now our H2 is properly styled. Now you can go crazy with the styling here. You can basically do everything because we have our CSS selector that tells us this is an H1, H2, H3 within rich text. So we could do everything, and we could even specialize our styling to a separate rich text. So we could have, you know, one rich text, and then we could have an ID, this special rich text, and if some rich text block has this ID, we could, for example, say the H1 should be underlined. So if we add this ID now to our rich text block here, ID special rich text, was it the exact ID? This special rich text, sorry. We should now see, yeah, obviously we didn't add the styling to the H2, so I'm going to adjust that one. But we should now see that our H2 is being underlined. All right, so this is just how you can really adjust your rich text styling in a super flexible way. Now, styling is not the main focus of this video. I just added a few more styles to make it look a bit more presentable. So let's deploy our project to Verel now. And this is actually very easy. I start by going into my project, just committing all the things that I've done. Just going to create an init commit. Obviously, don't do that. Commit more often. And I'm going to push. And now I just have to copy my environment variables here. So the database URI, payload secret, and all my S3 credentials. So I'm just going to copy them. And now I'm going into Verel. Make sure to have the right organization selected. And it already shows me website tutorial v3. Just now I'm going to click on import. I'm going to add environment variables. The cool thing is you can just do Command V and paste them in here. Click on deploy. And within 2 or 3 minutes, Verel should deploy our project and it should be ready to go. Now here we're getting an error though, which seems to be related to a type issue in the page file. So let's go back here. And as you can see in the page, it now complains that the type doesn't match to type any. And I think this is because we didn't make our layout required. So let's go back into Pages and here add our required flag and rerun the type generation. And if we check back into our page, yeah, now the issue seems to be gone. Also, we can replace the article tag with just a div tag. I copied this from a blog article rendering, and there it obviously makes sense to put it into an article tag. So let's deploy our changes. Fixed page rendering type issue. And let's go back to Verel and wait until this has automatically deployed again. And we're already getting our next error. Now TypeScript is complaining that the property alt does not exist on type string media. This is because here, for example, in our footer or header, we are referring to the logo.alt attribute. Now, if you know what's going on, logo is an upload field, which means it's a relationship field. So if this relationship field is not populated, it's just a string, and this string doesn't have an alt attribute. So we actually need to check if the type, so type of footer.logo is a string. And if it is a string, we need to return just, an empty string, and else we're going to return the alt text. Now, we could also check if footer.logo.alt is defined, or even footer.logo is defined. However, since we made this a required prop, this shouldn't be an issue. And we have to do the same thing with the other ones here as well, just adjusting it. So what we have to do here to make TypeScript happy is to add this empty string here, add an additional fallback to make sure it's really going to be a string. Same thing here. And let's do the same thing in the header as well. Type of header.logo string, then an empty string. And here type of header.logo string. All right. Next up, we have to fix another type error in our config here in regards to our bucket. So this needs string, and this can be string or undefined. So I can say either this or it will return empty string. All right, that is fixed. And last but not least, we need to fix this JSX element or null type error. We're going to go down right at the bottom and just going to add return null. Sorry, not there, but here. This will get rid of this error, and now we're clean and ready to deploy. Fixed TS errors. And let's see if Verel now deploys our project successfully. All right, it looks like our project has been deployed successfully. And if we check it out, so website tutorial v3/admin, we should be redirected to the admin panel. Let's try to log in. And voila, here's our admin panel. Everything is all right. This will be it for today's video. If you do have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. And apart from that, take care and see you in the next video.